Hello, BookTube. I have a Brattle haul for you today, yet again. This is my fourth consecutive day going to the Brattle Bookshop. I went first thing this morning on a beautiful late summer day to meet a bevy of booktubers. It was incredible fun. It was a great pinnacle to a great week. Scott Danielson was there, and he brought Jason Harrigan, who both of them used to have booktube channels, and Mark Richardson and his wife Deb came down from Vermont, and we all met together at the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston. And it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. This gathering, this get-together, has been delayed by years. And it finally happened. A great bookish group of people descending on the Brattle sale lot and then the Brattle shop itself. It was incredible. We browsed all around. We got a ton of books. We filmed a collective book haul on the third floor of the Brattle. And that video exists somewhere. It wasn't filmed on my phone, so sooner or later it will be up. I'm hoping that I can post it on this channel, even if whoever filmed it posted on their channel as well. I'd love it if it's in multiple places. That was a lot of fun, but we were worried about time. After all, we were on the third floor of the shop, which is a part of a going concern. We were worried about just chatting forever and ever about books, so we were all as terse as we could be. And some of us found that easier than others. But I thought that once I got back here and I finished pampering the baby, the one person who wasn't happy about all these extracurricular activities of mine was my little dog. She was not happy. Were you, baby? You weren't happy at all. No, you weren't. I walked her, pampered her, of course. I was gone all morning, so it felt natural to give her a very long, self-indulgent walk, but it's a little too warm. It was almost 85 degrees when by the time I got back here. So she doesn't want to walk in that kind of weather anyway. I'll make it up to her. I'll make it up to her down the line. But once I was ruminating for a bit, I thought, before I settle down to work, surely we should do a solo version of that haul, and rather than duplicate things, I thought I would add some things as well. So I took a minute to get some props. The first two things are not props at all. They are new arrivals. I'll try to note this in the show notes or wherever so that you know not to miss it in case the old books bore you. This first one is from an indie author. So I thought I would show this to you. This is a novel called Schroeder by Neil Cassidy. A very arresting cover there, cartoon eyes and mouth on an actual face. And I have a note for it, but it's just a note from the author. So let's read the back of the book. This is going to be $14 paperback, if you choose to get it in print and paper format. When an ordinary young man wakes up in his quiet neighborhood on a day seemingly like all others, the city he's lived in all his life has no idea what's about to befall it once he sets out on a day-long bike ride carrying a purposely packed backpack and a definitive plan. Who is Schroeder, and what motivates his brutal killing spree? As he cycles from one victim's home to the next, keeping pace with the rhythm of a city that burgeons to life under an unceasingly dazzling sun, exposing both its beauty and vivacity and its dark, dirty underbelly, Schroeder lays bare his dreams, disappointments, delights, and dismays, establishing himself as a compelling contemporary anti-hero. If he kills people, he's a villain, not an anti-hero. The day rolls ominously towards its climax through hectic city streets, lush suburban gardens, stately mansions, and decrepit housing projects, punctuated by Schroeder's reflections on a society in shambles and a deeply damaged, if not broken, humanity, but not without revealing life's boundless wonder and infinite possibilities for joy and redemption through moments that are within and yet tragically beyond Schroeder's grasp. Okay, well, that sounds fascinating to me. So I don't have any details about this thing, but this is a finished copy. So Schroeder will be in your bookstores or available for you to get online. And then we have a package that we can open here before we get to a reprise of the book. So I'm sorry, I don't know about that other video. You may be hearing about these books twice in one day. This package is from Oxford University Press, but it's not a big thing. So it'll be one of their wee little things here. Let's see. Oh my. Oh, goodness gracious. Wonderful. All right, this is a finished copy. This is 250 pages. It will be $25. and it comes out in mid-October. It is by Lisa Bittell, and it is called Otherworld, 9 Tales of Wonder and Romance from Medieval Ireland. How wonderful. A mysterious woman appears nightly at the bedside of a prince and sings to him until he falls sick with love for her. A determined hero tracks his beloved through several incarnations, struggling to win her back. A young warrior seeks a woman who turns into a swan. These are the plots of little-known, anonymous tales composed over 1,000 years ago in monastic libraries of Ireland. In poetry and prose, they tell us what happens when human and supernatural lovers cross the boundaries between our world and the other world, set in the lost time of heroes and demigods, warrior queens, and other folk of the Irish otherworld. These stories inspired some of the earliest fairy tales of France and England. What is more, they are sexier, funnier, and bloodier than better-known medieval myths and romances. Fantastic. Okay, and the Lisa Bittell is a historian and novelist. So some of these stories, just on the outline here, some of these stories will be familiar from a couple of great old Penguin anthologies, Penguin Classic anthologies from decades ago, that did prose translations of some of these things that I imagine will be, this will be much newer. Oh, how wonderful. Okay, and this does, for your $25, you not only get scholarly apparatus and new translations, but you also get illustrations. All through, one per story, I would imagine. Great. Fantastic. Okay. So those are the new books to start us off. And now we will look at the old books again. These, I should warn you, if you saw the abbreviated version of this, if it's up already by the time this video goes up, there is an edition here. I pulled a switcheroo at the very last minute at the registers. So the first 2 things that we got were Penguin Classics. I got the Peter Green edition of the Poems from Exile of the Roman poet Ovid. Dovetails rather neatly with a historical novel that I read last night, David Malouf's book An Imaginary Life, about a novel set in Ovid's exile from Rome. He was exiled from Rome and spent years and years in Pontus on the Black Sea, far from Rome, far from even reliable gossip about Rome, never allowed to return. Died in exile, even when ambassadors and ministers from other parts of the Roman world, from client kingdoms or even rival kingdoms, were commenting on it in the capital. They were commenting on it to first Caesar Augustus and then Tiberius Caesar. They were commenting on how weird it is that this famous poet, whose works are available in translation in my own country, you don't honor him. You've exiled him and you won't say why, and you won't bring him home. The Poems from Exile are lovely. They are difficult. They're more difficult, I think, to get into than anything else that Ovid did. But it doesn't matter anyway, because with this Penguin, I will be reading Peter Green. He can't shut up about the classics once you get him in an editorial role. So this thing will have a huge introduction. It'll have lots and lots of notes. And it'll be him that I'll be reading. It'll be his verse. And that's fine. That's what I did with his Iliad and Odyssey. That's fine by me. And I when I saw this out in the sale lot, I for the life of me could not remember if I had a copy. I might have a copy of this. I have the Oxford World Classics of this. And I'm momentarily blanking on the translator, but I don't know for sure that I have the Penguin. So now I do. And the other Penguin that I got was another poetry volume. So just like Andrew Marvell the other day, this is 2 Penguin poetry volumes in 1 week. And this is George Herbert. This is the complete. This is everything. This is the church. This is everything. This is everything that he wrote. And it's not a lot, and there's a lot of other stuff in here. And this is a great volume. Just fantastic. Very casually scholarly on the part of, who is it that does it? John Tobin does a great job with this. Introducing it, undergirding all of the poems. The poems can get a little bit steep, but probably not too steep if you are a believing Christian. These are some of the finest Christian poetry ever written. And Herbert led a fascinating life. So, and this is just a one-stop volume. This is a classic example of the one-stop Penguin Classic, where if you've got the Penguin Classic of X, Y, or Z, it wouldn't be something like this. But if it's originally an English work, then if you've got the Penguin Classic of that English work, you probably don't need to stray far afield unless you're incredibly interested in it and want many different editorial viewpoints. I now have both of these. I haven't yet checked, but I will check the Penguin Classic bookcase and see if these are doubles. I don't think either one of them is. Then I found this is just perfect condition. I would have left this behind. I had this once as a trade paperback. I read it as a trade paperback. I was not all that impressed with it, but I thought I'd give it another try. I was feeling antic. I waited a long time to go to the Brattle with these particular gentlemen. I waited a long time for that. This is Somerset Maugham, and this is his book Then and Now, which is a novel of the Italian Renaissance. It's historical fiction. And I don't think I am bruising anyone's ego to say that Maugham is not good at historical fiction. I will reread this sometime before the end of the year, and I will do it with an eye towards wondering why that is. What is it that makes good historical fiction that he is undeniably not doing in this book? I've read it twice, and the two times that I've read it, I thought, that wasn't good. Characters aren't believable. They aren't doing anything for any particular reason, which is true in a lot of Maugham's short fiction, but it ought to be true in a historical novel. But I've never actually read it with that idea in mind. What is it that would have made this a great historical novel, or even a good one? So it was worth it because all this stuff was dirt cheap. The Brattle is extremely reasonably priced. Then we have Martin Duberman. This is his book, his biography of Charles Francis Adams, the son of John Quincy Adams. And I was lightly mocked for this in that other upload, the other Brattle, the epic one that has 4 people and also a couple of guest appearances from Zach at the Brattle. I was mocked just lightly for this, and the reason why, it was all in good fun, but the reason why is because this is a Steve book. How many times when I've done Brattle book hauls have I mentioned that there is such a thing as a Steve book? A book that only Steve is going to find interesting. He's going to find it genuinely interesting. This is a perfect example of that. This is Adams was, among many other things. I mean, he was born in Boston. We passed within 5 minutes of his house today. Raised in Boston, went to school at Harvard, and he, among many other things that he did, I mean, he served in government, but he was also Abraham Lincoln's minister to the court of St. James, and played a huge role in making sure the right people heard him when he made the case that England should not come into the American Civil War on the side of the South. Even though they have a textile export industry that you really like and make a lot of money off, you shouldn't do it. Now, there is an argument to be made that England would never have done that anyway, would never have allied itself with a slave state, having so recently thrown off slavery themselves, but you never know. You never know. I don't think we'll ever know how much the United States is indebted to Charles Francis Adams for the right word in the right ear, for all of those bookish evenings in nasty London weather that he did in order to fight the good fight to keep the Union cause alive. And Duberman is a great biographer. One thing that I couldn't do while I was at the shop was show you, this is what I was talking about. He wrote this, a 1-volume biography of James Russell Lowell that is really, really good. If you care about James Russell Lowell, but of course you don't. This is also a Steve book. but I'm happy to have it. Absolutely happy to have it. I will put a plastic covering over this. I have a neat story about plastic coverings. I'll put a plastic covering over this, and it'll go on my Steve bookshelf. Then this next one, a trade paperback. This might not be a keeper. It will depend on how enjoyable these things are. I don't remember the last time I read them that they were all that enjoyable, but you never know. This is a guy, de la Baudière, who some of you may know from other writings. He's a prolific historian, but he edited the Letters of Samuel Pepys. And there you have a ship in the background, because Pepys, in addition to being a famous diarist, we all know him as a famous diarist, he held major positions in the British government, mainly involving the Navy. Was the subject of a high-profile state trial. So it's often been said that if Pepys had not written an immortal diary, we would still know his name, we would still remember him as the father of the English Navy. But he wrote, in that capacity, a huge amount of correspondence when he was sober. He wrote a huge amount of correspondence. And I want to go at this again. I didn't read this edition. I've never read Dave Baudier's, but I've read letters of Pepys before, and they seemed very stiff, very official, very much aware of the fact that the world was looking over his shoulder, very much different from his diary. But I want to see if maybe, I just can't imagine Samuel Pepys writing anything boring. So I want to see if there's a playful element to these things. A lot of the letters that he wrote, even in his official capacity, were written to people that he knew personally. And it was in a time when, there were no paparazzi, so you could write a rollicking letter. We'll see. Then this was, I mentioned this in that other video, this is a rebuy. Also a second chance. I saw this book when I was at the Brattle yesterday with Janet Wertman. She's a Tudor-era historical novelist, so we were raiding the Tudor section upstairs in the history section. And I saw this book. I've had it before. I've read it. I love it. But I got rid of it, and I didn't really lament that fact because I thought, sure, you love it and you love the author, but do you really need the book? And then overnight I realized, yeah, I do really need the book. The book is a fascinating story. The author is fantastic. The author is Dermot McCullough, and this is his gigantic biography of Thomas Cranmer. It's going to look very boring, but this is not boring. Cranmer led a fascinating life. Personally, his personal life had all sorts of wrinkles and twists and turns in it, and also professionally. Right at the white-hot heart of court politics during the reign of Henry VIII, which was not exactly a smooth-sailing reign if you are a churchman. And Cranmer is the subject of this huge biography. And of course, you'll know Dermot McCullough because he wrote a huge biography of Cromwell as well. Cromwell and Cranmer knew each other. They were as close as either one of them got to being friends with each other. And I often think what it must have been like for Dermot McCullough to write those two books. Because writing a biography like this means that past a certain point, you are eating, sleeping, and breathing your subject with a degree of all-consuming obsession that's hard to explain if you haven't tried it. And when you're that down deep in the deeds, in the details of the lives of these two men, what it must do to Dermot McCullough to know how horribly they both die. It's to know that you're not going to see either one of these guys into a peaceful old age and the comfort of their deathbed. Cranmer's death was much worse than Cromwell's. Cromwell's was, as Dermot McCullough says at the end of his Cromwell biography, even a botched execution is over quickly. I think that if you had asked a lot of the victims of execution under Henry VIII, they would have said otherwise. But I think what McCullough had in mind when he made that comment in his Cromwell book is what Cranmer's death was like. Because if you're burned to death, which he was, it's not going to be the same. That isn't over quick. But I love this book, not just the gruesome ending, so I'm happy to have it. Then this next thing, I love ancient Rome. That's going to come as no surprise to any of my old IRL friends, none of whom watch this channel, who often will quip. For decades they quipped, "Oh, Steve, yeah, dead Kennedys, dead Romans, and dogs." I love histories of ancient Rome. I love the ones that come from ancient Rome. And I also love the ones that happened after the 19th century Germans gave us the science of history. And you'd think there would be a lot of those that would be absolutely top-notch. I think you'd be wrong. It's so, as I've said on so many different occasions about so many other subjects, it's so easy to write a bad, boring, or dumb book about ancient Rome. It's so easy to do. And your publisher, they just want a thing to fill their list. They're not walking around the back corridors of your book testing it for quality. Usually, they're not doing that. So when I find there's a small list, I'd say probably 35 books in English about some period or aspect of ancient Rome that are truly superb. And most of those I don't have. Most of those I only encountered when I was doing the mother of all Roman reading in preparation for my own book about the Roman Emperor Trajan. So every time I find a volume like that was on that reading, I like to snap it up. And I found one today. I found Elizabeth Rawson's book, Intellectual Life in the Late Roman Republic. So these are the authors who were young men who were just dallying, just starting out with verse or plays or whatnot when the whole Roman world was falling apart. Or it's the older literary figures who were at the fullness of their strength when the Roman Republic was falling apart and being replaced by a megalomaniac and his worshipful cult of millenarians who thought, well, I don't particularly like this guy. I don't think I can trust him as far as I can throw him. But I have racked up such debts and such criminal liability and such social disgrace in the old world, the world that has been around for 1,000 years. I have racked up such an unlivable debt of disgrace in that world that I literally have no hope unless the whole world changes. So I've got to throw in with the whole world changing. I've got to do that because I cannot pay my social debts. I cannot ever look my friends in the face in public again. I cannot pay my financial debts. I cannot avoid a trial for treason, or I have to have the world change completely. And maybe a lot of the people that I know die. That has to happen, or I can't survive. A lot of those literary figures were right there for that change, and lined up behind a bald total fraud who said, I alone can fix it. And Rawson goes through, there's a huge amount of writing from that period, an embarrassment of riches. A fraction of what there was, but still 20, 30, 40 times what we have for a lot of other historical figures, a lot of other historical periods, including much later periods. And she goes through it all. Oh my, this is just such an exhaustively researched book with, the footnotes and the endnotes and everything. Just a perfect addition to my admittedly small ancient Roman library. It's admittedly small, but it's designedly so. I don't want another book on, the bloody ends of the Caesars or anything like that. I want it to be either really stylistically different, like that book from last year, Palatine, about Vitellius, about the Roman Emperor Vitellius, or I want it to be consummately scholarly. I want one of the two. I don't just want another, can you believe? Gladiators. That sort of thing just doesn't appeal. Then I found this thing. I have had this before many times. I checked when I got back here to see if maybe this was a double, and I think it isn't. I got a copy of this just a little while ago. It was probably this year that I hauled it from the Brattle, and I think I got rid of it right away. I think I sent it out to one of you right away. And this is just one of these anthologies, the Book Lovers Anthology, which is just different quotes from different aspects of reading. So do we have a list of some of them? Good and bad books, old and new books, the friendship of books, the joys of reading, bibliophilia, literary worlds, the library, these sorts of things I just love. I love these anthologies. I don't pick through them. I usually find myself just reading through them from front to back. Even though that's not how they're supposed to be used, I still usually do it anyway. Then I found this was a gamble. This is the kind of gamble that you take if the books are dirt cheap. All the books at the sale lot of the Brattle are dirt cheap. I found the collected stories of Louis Auchincloss. I will read this. This is probably not a keeper unless some of these stories blow me away, but nothing by Auchincloss ever has. Even his biography of Edith Wharton is not a blow you away type book. These are mannerly. They are well behaved, unless there are levels of wry humor that I have not caught before. And one of the neat things about a big anthology like this is that'll jump right out at me. I'll be reading one story after another. I'll have a chance to acclimate and maybe get an ear for the author's voice. I have probably read a lot of these. A lot of these probably come from the glory days of the New Yorker when I read everything. I would get a new issue of the New Yorker in its brown paper wrapper, and I would read literally every word of it. Maybe I've read a lot of these before. We'll see if they ring a bell. But short story anthologies, just in general, lots and lots of fun. Then I found this, History in Our Time by David Kennedy. This is collections of book reviews and literary essays of one kind or another that he did for various periodicals about, obviously, Princess Diana, but also Prince Philip, or Elizabeth II is in here a couple of times, I believe. Also, discrete book reviews. Just I think this has a whole section on just book reviews. Um, okay, the whole of the House of Windsor is in here. But also, yeah, books on Florence Nightingale, Winston Churchill, John Buchan, A.G.P. Taylor, Margaret Thatcher. So this is just a feast. I love the way this author writes. And this hardcover replaces this little paperback, this little penguin paperback, that really is a little bit too little for my liking. So I will go through. It'd be a half an hour period. It'll be blissful. I don't mean to describe it as drudgery, but I will go through these side by side and copy out my marginalia into this, and then I'll get rid of this one because it's a little bit on the small side and a little bit on the fragile side. Whereas I like this author more than enough to warrant having him in hardcover. And then I mentioned on that other video that I bought this next book as a possible buddy read with a struggling tiny little YouTube channel that I would love to do a buddy read with. The book is Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel, the second book in her Cromwell trilogy. And this book deals with the fretful rise, the horrible, uncertain reign, and the fall of Anne Boleyn, which is fresh on my mind because that, of course, is the whole subject of Philippa Gregory's book, The Other Boleyn Girl, which I just finished rereading. I gave it a nice, slow reread. I didn't blaze my way through it. I gave it a nice, slow reread to try and catch all of the subtler things that Philippa Gregory was doing. I caught a lot more. I'm very glad that I went through it. I found a trade paperback of The Other Boleyn Girl, and I was originally reading that, and there was a discrete moment. I don't remember where I was reading it. Probably in a chair somewhere. Maybe that chair. I was reading that trade paperback, and I thought, this is gross. I mean, this is not a new trade paperback. This is noticeably old and noticeably gross. It's not just that someone else has owned this, it's that I wouldn't want to meet someone else. And that got me thinking, I would love a hardcover of The Other Boleyn Girl. No idea when's the last time I've ever seen one, but I would love one. That story was fresh on my mind when the idea was floated, perhaps, of a buddy read of Bring Up the Bodies. And that made me smile because when I was at the Brattle yesterday with Janet Wertman, in addition to the Cranmer book, in the sale lot, I kept seeing hardcover copies of Bring Up the Bodies, the U.S. hardcover of Bring Up the Bodies, which I reviewed for, I don't remember who I reviewed it for. I think it was the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. The blurb that you see on it from one of those two things is me. But I didn't like the look of the American edition. I don't like the American editions of any of the three books of The Mirror and the Light, of the Cromwell trilogy. So in honor of this read-along, I thought, well, like it or not, at least you have a nice hardcover. I have a trade paperback of Bring Up the Bodies and nothing else. So I thought, in honor of the possibility of this read-along, this buddy read, I'll get one of those hardcovers. And so I did. One of them was out in the sale lot. I plucked that up. And when we did our multi-voiced, multi-person book haul up on the third floor of the Brattle, on camera, I mentioned that it isn't really the edition that I want, that I really want a UK hardcover. There have been two UK hardcovers. They're both better than the US version. And while I was complaining about that, Zach got up from the work he was doing. He was working at the desk. He got up from the work he was doing, went and found a beautiful UK hardcover and just inserted it into the video. So that's what I have instead of the American version. I now have the UK version of Bring Up the Bodies in hardcover. Terrific. Absolutely terrific. Now I'm really hoping that buddy read happens. Really hoping that it does. And then finally, the last thing that I got was a last switcheroo. You will notice if you watch that other video when it goes up, some of the things that are missing here. There was, for instance, a hardcover copy of Ives' biography of Anne Boleyn that is great. It didn't have a dust jacket, and the hardcover was in pretty rough shape, and I thought, better get it anyway, just to show that you're a good sport. But then I thought, you have it as an ebook. You reread it just recently as an ebook. You can wait. You can either see the trade paperback or the hardcover with a dust jacket. You don't need to get this thing that you're going to have to lug back to the house that you don't want. And the same thing is true with a volume of the second journal of Samuel Pepys. I had that volume. I showed it in the multi-voice book haul, but I ended up not wanting it. I've had that volume before, and I know I never go back to it. I was in the mood for it because of the letters of Samuel Pepys, but that's all. So I put those two back and grabbed something else right before I checked out. The other day, out in the sale lot, I spotted a mass market paperback of Nightwings by Robert Silverberg, a great novella of his, that one of the best things that he ever wrote. But the paperback out in the sale lot, which had only, it was a small thing, it had only Nightwings, was really ugly. It had really ugly cover art, and I'm really shallow. I don't want to be looking at that. I don't want to have that as my version of Nightwings. I'm pretty sure that I have Nightwings as an ebook. But even so, I was thinking, I'll just wait. There'll be a Robert Silverberg paperback out there somewhere that'll come along that won't have that cover art. And the Brattle was insistent. The Brattle wanted me to reread Nightwings, so it presented me with this. This is a very old Marvel graphic novel of Nightwings by Robert Silverberg. It's written by Cary Bates, I think. Oh, no, this is a DC graphic novel. It's written by Cary Bates, who wrote Superman Forever and Ever, and it's drawn by Gene Colan, the great Gene Colan. And I remember this thing. I bought this when this came out, when these kinds of square-bound, standalone, more expensive. This was what? $5.95. I remember when this came out. This was 1985. I might even have got a copy. I didn't pass up a lot of these things, and I can't think that I would have passed up something with Gene Colan artwork. I believe that cover is Bill Sienkiewicz. I wonder if this is going to tell me. It seems unmistakable to me. Yeah, the cover is Bill Sienkiewicz. So, and this is Cary Bates is listed as the writer here, but he's very, very reverential to Silverberg's story. So this is the whole story, and with terrific artwork. So I now have at least a version of Nightwings until I find a paperback that I like. Look at Robert Silverberg. Look at that. God, he doesn't look like that anymore. And this has blurbs. Philippe Jose Farmer says Silverberg rivals Machiavelli in his knowledge of human nature, and if science fiction writers were angels, he would be the heavenly singer, Israfel. Okay, Harlan Ellison, let's see if he can do even better in the absurdity of sweepstakes. When Silverberg creates celestial choruses sing Nightwings fills the reader with glorious music. Okay, that did win the absurdity sweepstake. The last blurb is by Isaac Asimov, and if he doesn't just explicitly talk about Robert Silverberg's Wang, then he will fall behind the other two. Robert Silverberg is one of the great versatile masters of science fiction. To have him appear in a new dimension for readers is wonderful for those readers and for science fiction. Okay, no mention of his Wang. Boy, though, that's making me wonder. New dimension. Are those blurbs for this? For this graphic novel? That would be incredible. I'll have to look into that and see if maybe I can find out. That would be amazing if they were actually blurbing this graphic novel from the mid-'80s. But anyway, I now have a copy of Nightwings, and on the pile it goes. So there you go. That was my final Brattle book haul for quite some time. I will not be going to the Brattle for 4 days in a row. I will not be going to the Brattle again for quite some time. So I wanted to give you a standalone haul, even if that other video goes up. And you can see why, right? Because I could not have talked for 33 minutes alone during that multi-part video, or we'd have been there for 4 hours. It's always dangerous to have me and Jason Harrigan talk about books anyway. So we have Nightwings, the graphic novel. We have Bring Up the Bodies, Hilary Mantel, in a beautiful edition. We have History in Our Time by David Kennedy, the collected stories of Louis Auchincloss, see what I might have missed, Intellectual Life in the Late Roman Republic, Darren McCullough's big fat biography of Thomas Cranmer, the letters of Samuel Pepys in his official capacity, the Book Lovers Anthology with all sorts of great quotes, Charles Francis Adams, classic Steve book, Then and Now, historical novel from Somerset Maugham, The Complete English Poems by George Herbert, and finally The Poems of Exile, Peter Green's Ovid. So there you go. That was a Brattle book haul to end all Brattle book hauls for today, because I have waited years to shop at the Brattle in this company, years. So that it felt wonderful. Uh, so there you go. No more Steve Little Miss Popularity antics. Okay, I'm going back to being a lonely, frail little shut-in. But I thought you should get 2 Brattle hauls out of one day. I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.